Hello and welcome all you wonderful people out there in YouTube land. This is the Texas Special YouTube channel. If you are a new viewer, hope you like what you see. Hope you hit that subscribe button. If you are a returning viewer, thank you for the love and support which you have given the channel. It is greatly appreciated. Welcome to this September 2023 quarterly Locomotive product review. Now, as per the usual, we have an HO scale offering and an O scale offering. This is an Athearn Ready to Roll Union Pacific GP38-2 number 535. This here is a Lionel Lionchief RS3 lettered for the Delaware-Lackawanna number 4103. So let's get right off into this. We will start off with the HO scale locomotive. To get this guy out of the box, you just lift off the top of the box like such. That'll reveal the plastic sleeve and cradle. You just pop them right on out. Inside the box you also have the product disclaimers and an exploded parts diagram with each and every single part and part number on this locomotive. Now it was supposed to come with an owner's manual and all that other wonderful stuff. I got this used. I got this secondhand, so all the rest of it that's supposed to be in here ain't in here, but it's supposed to come with like an Athearn news sign-up sheet, the propaganda sheet as I like to call it, an owner's manual, the warranty information, and some various legalese leaflets from Verizon Hobby and not Verizon, Horizon Hobby, and of course Athearn. To take this engine out of the plastic cradle, you slide it out of this clear plastic sleeve like such. Set the sleeve aside. The lock for the plastic cradle on this is broken. If it weren't, you would undo this and that would allow this to open up, but it's broken, so I'm not even going to bother really taking it out. Just move that aside. Get this piece of track that I snagged, and we set this thing down on the track. We'll put the sleeve back on the cradle, put all this back in the box where it goes, and we will take a better look at this here locomotive now that she is out of the package and out for the world to see. Alright, here we have an overview of the engineer's side of the locomotive. You can see you've got some nice clear lettering, some nice clear sharp lettering. The paint is nice and evenly applied. There's crisp separation between the red of the block lettering, and if you look very closely you'll see there's a little bit of prototypically correct black trim outlining the red lettering. There's very crisp separation between the black outlining of the lettering as well as the red lettering itself, between the yellow and the harbor mist gray, yellow and red stripe up top here, as well as between the red stripe and the harbor mist gray. Alright, zooming in close, here on the cab on the engineer side you can see we have the plastic operating knuckle coupler, magnetic knuckle coupler, notice the trip pin there. You have the prototypically correct FRA mandated contrasting paint on the hand railings here, as well as the edges of the steps on the pilot of the locomotive. You have simulated DOT reflective tape right here along the side sill of the locomotive. You have a nice GP38-2 lettering here, as well as the 535 and the UP shield right here on the battery box. This is the ground light, which obviously does not operate. You have some fairly good detailing there on the trucks, the side frame of the trucks. And you can just barely see it on the left side of the screen, but that is the filler nozzle for the fuel tank. And of course, you have some separately applied details. You've got the horn, you have some grab irons right here and right here on the nose of the locomotive. Moving on to the center of this locomotive, you see a few grills. You've got this right here, you've got the grid on the dynamic brake cooling grid, and you can see this grill back here up top on the left edge. That is the air intake for the locomotive and for the air compressor. None of these grills are see-through. They are cast onto the locomotive body, which is fine. They still look good. And this is not a super high-end locomotive, so I'm not really expecting scale trains quality out of this guy. You've got the main reservoir here, fuel tank, and you've also got the it's hard to see even for me staring at this thing in person, but that is the emergency shutoff valve for the fuel tank. You've got loads of cast on detailing here. All the door latches along the long hood of the locomotive and the hinges and everything are cast on, but it's very nicely done. And here we are on the rear of the locomotive on the engineer's side. If you look very closely, you will notice that there is a detail part missing right here. This is not the original truck that came with this locomotive. When I bought it, it was missing this side frame on this truck. It has since been replaced and painted. The side frames I was able to acquire from another Tesla Club member, and yet another Tesla Club member who had an airbrush was able to take care of painting the unpainted black plastic side frames for me. You've got these ownership agreement yada yada BS right here, as is prototypically correct. Again, this grill here for the air intake is cast on, and you can see a separately applied hand grab iron here, and of course the FRA mandated contrasting paint on the ends of the hand railings and the edges of the steps along the pilot. Alright, coming around here to the rear of the locomotive. This engine does not have the slip resistant tread on the walkway, but then again neither does the real thing, usually. None of the GP38s that I personally have worked on, I haven't seen it on any of them. You'll notice that the deck plate right here, that should be right here, is missing, although there is MU hoses. The receptacles for the MU hoses are present, but there's no MU cable port, and there's no actually I take that back, there it is right there. But there's no MU cable, there's no actual MU hoses. Those are separately applied details that the modeler has to install. Given that this was a second-hand purchase, they weren't in the box, of course. Another view of the plastic knuckle coupler. You have some separately applied grab irons right here, some cast on detailing for what is supposed to be marker lights, and these little punch outs up top that are prototypically correct. They were designed into the locomotive, but UP never mandated they be punched out with class lights installed. And up here by the cooling fans, I don't know how well you can see it right now, but there is a sand filling port and a separately applied curved grab on that wraps around this cooling fan up top. Here we have the rear half of the conductor side of the locomotive. Again, you see that ownership agreement decal here. That is legible under magnification. The ground light detail, actually that might be the jack pad detail. Yeah, that's jack pad detail, my bad. Good detailing there on the trucks. The contrasted paint on the hand railings and the edges of the pilot steps, the cast on grill detail for the air intake, and some shots of a decent shot of some of the doors along the long hood, and kind of a profile of the separately applied grab irons here on the end of the locomotive. And you can see that separately applied grab on I was talking about earlier, just a little bit better up top there. You've also got some, no you do not, there are no separately applied lift rings or cast on lift rings for that matter. And moving on to the front half of the conductor side, here again you have the fuel filler nozzle, you've got the emergency shutoff, you've got a little high voltage warning label here. It's legible under magnification. Again, good paint separation. 535 GP38-2 lettering right there. The UP shield on the door, on the battery box, and the contrasted paint on the hand railings, and a side view of the number board there, which you'll see much better here in a second. And here we are on the front end of the locomotive. You can see the UP shield is nicely centered and wrapped around the crease of the nose of the locomotive. There's no flaking or cracking. It's very nicely applied. You've got a good shot of the contrasting paint on the hand railings of the locomotive. There is a little bit of thin and flaking right here on this conductor side, but that's fine. They do that in real life. Again, the deck plate, which would be laid down to cross over from one engine to another when they're MU'd, isn't there. You have the ports for the MU cable on either side, and you've also got the hose connections for the MU hoses on either side of the coupler. Another shot of the coupler, or a coupler. You can see a little bit more clearly the separately applied hand rungs, or grab irons rather, here, here, here. And I neglected to mention that cast on handbrake that's right here on the conductor side of the locomotive. There are no separately applied windshield wipers on this engine, which kind of sucks, but it is what it is. For the prices I paid for this thing, I cannot be too terribly heartbroken about that. I only paid $35 for this engine. So, yeah, and it does run perfectly, I might add. And the top of the locomotive, the roof of the locomotive. You can see the 3-chime air horn there. It's separately applied detail. The cast on sand filling port on the nose of the locomotive. Some more cast on vents here. The fan cover for this dynamic brake cooling grid fan is cast on. You've got the exhaust stacks here and some sparsely, it's well done, but it's a little Spartan cast on rivet detail for all the different panels. And on the rear of the engine, again the roof, you can see the cooling fans up top, again cast on, they're not see-through. This separately applied grab iron here that wraps around this rear cooling fan and the sand filling port. Since having acquired this engine, it's had limited runtime on the Stars Hollow Railroad. The amount of time it has ran, it hasn't given me any problems. It's been a very quiet, very smooth, consistent performing engine. Exactly what you want in a locomotive. Overall, it's a winner. Given that I acquired it used, I didn't have the detailed parts available, so that's why it doesn't have a snowplow. Whoever owned this before me didn't put the snowplow on the thing. But that's okay. I've seen a handful of UP Jeeps down here in Texas that don't have snowplows. Normally we don't need them. Also missing are the sunshades on the cab of the locomotive on both sides. That annoys me a little more, but again, for $35 I cannot be mad. Phenomenal locomotive, great product, and the Athearn GP38-2s are now marketed under a different, there's still the Athearn brand, I just can't remember what the series is. Either way, they still make these engines, not lettered for UP, but they still make them, and these are floating around out there as well as in various other road names. So if you want one, I can't say enough good things about this engine. In addition, this particular model is not a DCC equipped engine, but it is DCC ready. So what that means is it has a 9-pin plug, so you can get a DCC decoder, whether sound equipped or not, that comes with a wiring harness that has a plug on it. You literally pop the shell off, plug this thing in. Because I don't have a decoder for it yet, I'm not going to go through the trouble of popping the shell off and whatnot just to show that to you. Believe me, it's there, and it will greatly simplify any DCC installations that are required for one of these engines. Or if you're lucky and you find one, they did make DCC equipped variants of this locomotive. Now, let's take a look at this cool Lionchief engine. Alright, if you've been watching this channel for a while, then you know I am a hardcore O-gauge guy, and I absolutely love anything Lionel. This is not mine. The Jeep is my wife's. This is a loaner from a friend and fellow Texla Model Railroad Club member. He dropped off with me for the specific purpose of doing a product review on this locomotive. This is a Lionel RS3. As you can denote from the box, it is not only Lionchief, it is not only equipped with the Lionchief remote control system, it is also Bluetooth equipped. Now, that is exactly what that sounds like. For those of you that don't know, Lionchief remote control system, this engine has a remote control, a literal remote control with a horn button, a throttle, a bell button, and if the locomotive is so equipped, a crew talk feature. And again, if the locomotive is so equipped, which this one is not, unfortunately, coupler opening buttons, one for the front and one for the rear. That doesn't apply to this engine, so I'm not going to touch on that any further. To get the engine out of the box, you open up the rear, one of the flaps on either side and just slide the box off. Lay it on its side there. Lift off this cover. Set that aside. Here we have the remote. As I said, bell, throttle, crew talk, horn. This is the on-off switch. See the red light, you're on. No red light, you're off. And it's distinctly lettered for the engine for easy identification. You got Delaware-Lackawanna 4103. Also included in here is an extra pair of traction tires right there. They're taped to the inside of the plastic. We'll remove the snack pack so it's out of the way, and we will use these ribbons here to gently pull the engine out of the cradle. We'll set the ribbons back in. We'll put the snack pack back in. I call it a snack pack facetiously. Don't eat this. And if you do, don't say it's because I called it a snack pack, because this is my disclaimer right here and now. It ain't a snack pack. Don't frickin' eat it. Sad to say that the state of society is such that that's got to be said, but you know what? It is what it is, and there ain't nothing I can do about it. So we'll put the engine on this section of fast track that I have here. Slide it forward, and we'll take a little bit closer look at this beauty. So the first thing you notice is, well, that I noticed, I don't know how well you notice it, you have crew members in the cab. There's in this era, that would be a fireman, and on the other side is a locomotive engineer. They're facing that way. The horn is facing that way, as is prototypically correct. So the crew members are actually backwards. And I'd be willing to bet a ridiculous sum of money that if I put this thing in forward on the remote control, obviously there's no power to this track, but if I were to put it in forward, it would go this way, toward the short hood, which is prototypically incorrect. Now, yes, I know, toy trains, 3 rails, who cares about prototypically correct, yada, yada, yada. Not the point. For whatever reason, in O gauge, forward is usually towards the short hood, and rarely is it toward the long hood, even when running long hood lead is prototypically correct. You have very thick, oversized hand railings, and these are plastic hand railings. They're attached to a strip of plastic along the side sill of the locomotive, and when you look at this thing from up top here momentarily, you'll see that they're not even touching the cab. But again, this is not a scale locomotive. This is a 027 type toy train or train set type locomotive. You have rather Spartan detailing on the trucks. There's some shock absorbers here. You've got the journal covers, the pistons here, 2 per truck. I'm not sure if that's prototypical or not, but I mean, it looks good. It's very, very Spartan detail, but it does look good. Of course, with O gauge, with the cheaper price-wise type stuff, the train set type stuff, you have the swinging pilot, where the steps and the pilot and the coupler are all attached to the truck there. That allows the engine to take tighter curvature than it otherwise would be able to. This will actually run on 027 curves. So for you non-O gauge guys, that means this thing will run on a curve as tight as 27 inches diameter. That's from one side of the curve to the other is 27 inches across. Here we are looking at what prototypically would be considered the rear of the locomotive. If you're going by Lionel's specs, the front of the locomotive. You can see the hand railings are very short. They're not very tall at all. You can see back here this space between the end of the hand railing and the cab, and it's actually out beside the cab. You've got cast on grab irons here. Some very nicely done striping, alternating yellow and black striping for visibility and safety. You have contrasting paint on the ends of the grab irons, which in this era wasn't necessarily mandated by federal government standards, but it was done more for visibility from the aspect of motorists seeing an approaching train, or an employee or maintenance of way folks on the track being able to better see approaching trains. You can see the crew members there. No, you can't. But they're there. Cast on door detailing. This right here is an MU cable port, which is prototypically correct. You have the MU cables, or excuse me, MU hoses and the big air hose simulated here. Operating knuckle coupler, plastic knuckle coupler. This has the thumbtack magnetic style knuckle coupler, so you can either open this with a magnetic uncoupling track section, or with this tab on the side of the coupler operates that manually. The coupler is plastic. And a separately applied handbrake wheel. Here we are looking at the engineer side of the locomotive. No real difference as compared to the fireman side. The only real difference is the smokestack is offset, which is prototypically correct, more toward the engineer's side. You've got these cast on grills, which I failed to mention. There's another one on the other side, or another pair. This is actually two grills for the air intake for the locomotive's air compressor, and of course cooling the locomotive itself. You have some additional cast on grills here on these doors along the long hood, and the door hinges and latches are all cast onto the locomotive, as well as this pipe here on the side. You've got this step right here, so that on the prototype, a person would be able to exit the cab through this door, which is cast on to the back side of the cab, or actually the front side of the cab on the engineer's side, and safely get down to the walkway right here. Again, the hand railings are a little oversized, but that's fine. This isn't a true scale model. And here we are looking at the front of the locomotive. If you go by Alco's specifications, if you're going by Lionel's, the rear of the locomotive. So you have some cast on hand rungs, or grab irons rather, another MU port up top here above the headlight, dual LED headlights, nice paint separation in the yellow versus black, and a nicely done 4103. And again, hand railings a little too short, but I've said it 100 times, I'm not saying it again. And cast on MU hoses and big air hose, coupler cut lever, and of course the operating magnetic knuckle style coupler on the rear of the engine, which is attached to the pilot, so that this thing can take much tighter curvatures than it otherwise would be able to. And here we are looking at the top of the locomotive, the roof of the locomotive. You can see the separately applied single chime air horn here. You've got some additional grill and louver detail up top here. Smokes the exhaust stack with a grill cover, cast on of course, and the cooling fan with a cast on grill. No lift ring detail of any variety, and the only rivet detail on the top side of the locomotive is this panel right here cover that the exhaust stack is attached to. Also, don't know how well you can see it, if you can see it at all, but there is the non-slip safety tread detailing on the walkway of the locomotive all the way around, with the exception of right here and right here. For this part they just did like some little plastic like dimples or whatever. On the underside of the locomotive is where Lionel likes to keep the control switches so that they're easily accessible, but yet they're not obtrusive in nature to where they're visible and they detract from the overall view of the model, the overall visual of the model. This engine, like most Lionchief locomotives, does have sound. It has rail sounds, and this is the on-off switch right here. You can see it says sounds, SNDS, shorthand for sounds. Toward the engineer's side is on, which it does say on written on the switch, and off is toward the fireman's side of the locomotive. To turn the sound on, you flick the switch up. To turn the sound off, flick it off. Turn the sound back on because I'm going to use sound when I do the review run. And as it so subtly suggests right there, that little blue icon is Bluetooth equipped. Overall, this is a good running locomotive. It is a pretty good pulling engine, as you will see here in the run video, which is will be coming up probably the following Sunday, so day after tomorrow. This engine is a lot of fun. I've played with it a few times on the railroad, and while I don't yet have one, the RS3 has now made it onto my official wish list. So hopefully I can do a product review at a later date of the second generation or possibly third generation of the Lionchief control system, and it be with my own. Thank y'all for watching. Hope y'all enjoyed the video. Hope y'all found it entertaining and informative. Texas Special out.